Talk.
Hi.
Talk at your normal level.
Hello, welcome back.
Michelle.
Hi, welcome back to our podcast. It's just the two of us today.
Having a nice sody pop.
Having a nice sody pop.
Mm-hmm. It's ASMR.
All right. We got some things to say today. We're going to discuss our first line of business. We're going to talk about, this podcast is going to be kind of geared more towards like dog trainers than clients, I would say. But I do think that if you're a client and you're looking to get into training your dog and working with somebody, maybe this would be some good truths for you to hear as well, and how to like approach dog training and wanting to get your dog and what you can expect from the experience. So we were thinking of talking about the idea of like customer service in its typical form or assumption, but how that applies in an industry where the customer is typically almost never right. Because customer service generally in most contexts is like, you just do whatever you can to make the customer happy.
Yeah.
They just need to leave the experience feeling happy and stuff like that. But that can be a lot more difficult when you're being hired for a service that you know more about them on, and that's why you're being hired. And how to balance creating a good customer experience and them enjoying the process and feeling respected, but also being able to teach and guide them, and in some instances tell them when they're wrong or they're not doing things correctly.
And give the hard truths, even though like it's uncomfortable to be able to like have to pick apart at people. This job is a lot of like, I have to pick at you and make sure that you're able to communicate with your dog.
Yeah.
And be successful ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be very difficult at times. And sometimes people don't always take to criticism well.
Yes.
I'd say like all of our clients have been absolutely wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But in other, companies or in this industry in general, I feel like that can be really difficult for people.
Yeah. I think that there's layers to it. I think that you have to, once you've been doing this a lot or for a longer period of time, I think you get very good at reading people and figuring out the best way to engage with the humans that they're going to receive the criticism well, and also picking your battles.
Yes.
On like how much you critique or what you critique. Typically, like, if I'm doing a first session with somebody, like my critiques are going to be like so minimal, if anything. And the reason I can get away with that is because I ideally create a first session that's like fail proof. Like there's not a lot you can do wrong with the stuff that I give you to do in the first session, because I want to build the same way that when you're training a dog, that you want to leave them feeling more confident every time you interact with them. You kind of want to carry that over to your humans too. You don't want them leaving a session feeling like, I didn't do anything fucking right that whole time. You want them leaving feeling like, I did it. I did the things,
Even small wins, like if you're isolating, if the dog overall is just a very difficult or challenging dog, like finding one thing that can be successful within the session is so important. And I think that goes such a long way for the dog and the owner to have that connection.
Yep.
So like as a trainer, you have to step back and be like, okay, there's a lot to unpack here.
Yes.
What can I isolate on my first session that can leave everybody feeling like, all right, we're finally starting to turn a corner. I'm in a good place. And if I keep attending these sessions, I'm going to have a substantially better relationship with my dog than before.
Yeah. Because the focus in the beginning and that's why I think not having short training programs is so beneficial, because I can't build a relationship with you in 3 lessons. that enables me to get to the point where you trust me and you will listen to me when I say that, like, don't do that. Like, our minimum for most of our programs is like, we do the 4-week board and train, but then we have a year of follow-up. And then for our private sessions, it's 10. You know what I mean? So, like, we have time. We have a lot of time. And I find that that makes it so much easier to really get into the cases where there's a lot of adjustments that need to be made, because I don't need to think about, okay, we only have 3 sessions. How am I going to tell this person that they need to stop sleeping in bed with their dog? They need to correct them for getting on the furniture. They need to do X, Y, and Z and make all of these crazy changes when I haven't had any time for them to care about my opinion at all.
Yes.
You know?
And like you can be bound by the pressure to move things faster when you have a shorter amount of sessions, when you haven't built that relationship. You can say, like, I need this to be successful. So with shorter sessions, although as a customer or a client, you're going to be like, I want what's cheapest and I want what's fastest. And unfortunately, a good dog trainer is not going to be cheap and it's not going to be fast. And you want somebody that's going to take that time with you and your dog and assess the best scenario for that dog, and not push your dog when they do not need to be pushed yet, and not to push you as you're starting to perfect 1 or 2 skills at a time that you can get really good at. Because if you're like kind of word vomit on somebody, the first lesson, like, they leave and they're like, what did I get myself into? They're like, am I going to be able to do this? So
you want to be able to break it down into, like, very digestible amounts for them to, like, leave feeling they're confident in what they're doing and what their expectations are, and they're going to be successful in it. Because every time that they are able to do something you ask, it's successful, and they see it contribute to the overall change in their dog, you build more rapport, more trust, and more of an ability to be very upfront with them about some maybe hard truths that they don't want to hear, or different things like that, because they trust you at that point. But if you don't have a lot of time, that gets a lot more difficult. So yeah, I think a big piece of that is, like, knowing the humans, reading their personalities. I find that humor is one of the best ways.
it's my go-to.
100% to, like, maybe communicate hard things with people, is to, like, add humor into it. And I think that's such a natural human thing, is most people receive that well. There are definitely some people I've worked with that's not the way to go about it, and I know it, but I would say most of the time, humans deal with, like, uncomfortable things, or even, like, tragedy or hard things, like, with humor. That's just kind of a natural coping mechanism. So I found that working humor into your sessions, especially in hard times, can lighten the mood, can create a little bit more of, like, a bantery type of relationship, you know, stuff like that.
It's important to, like, I think, navigate how to be likable too. And that's, like, a skill, like, you really have to perfect, like, how am I coming off right now? I need to be able to give you tough love when I need to give you tough love, but I don't want to come off sounding arrogant or offensive to you. So I have to figure out, like, how does this specific person take information well? And if they are offended by something, which rarely ever happens, then we need to be able to clarify what we intended of our point. And I never want to offend my clients. I never want them to feel like I'm judging them. I'm simply here to help you, but sometimes I have to, push a little bit.
Yes. And I think coming at things with an angle of just laying things out factually can be very helpful, because it removes, like, we're not pointing the finger. We're not saying, like, I'm trying to think of an example. An example of, like, the dog resource guards the owner, and you're trying to talk to them about how they can't have the dog sleep in their bed anymore. Because every time their husband walks in to come to bed, the dog growls at him or whatever, right? So obviously that's a situation where that needs to be a hard no. And it's not one where I could ethically say like, okay, I guess don't worry about it. We can address it another way. It's like, for safety, you cannot be doing that. And I have to tell you cannot do that. So in a situation like that, coming at it with just the logic and the truth of the situation, and instead of being like, you're being selfish by choosing your dog sleeping in your bed over the safety of your family, that's not going to be received well. Yeah. But if I phrase it as, okay, so our main goal and the main reason you came to training is because of these behavioral issues you're seeing with your dog guarding you towards other people. If you are in an incapacitated state where you are sleeping, we are not able to address those behaviors when they happen. Yes. And what that's going to do is allow the dog to reinforce that they can get away with doing stuff like that without being held accountable. And it puts other people in danger because we can't address it as it's happening. And so if we can't be able to address it, then we need to manage and avoid having access to perform the behaviors. And so if you phrase it that way, then you're likely going to get a much better response from the client of being like, that makes sense. And they really can't tell you it doesn't make sense. They could say like, oh, but it just makes me feel bad and I don't want to do it. Okay. But
you're still going to have your problems.
These are the goals, right? Do we want to prioritize our feelings or do we want to prioritize accomplishing your goals, right? And so I think that being able to relay information in a way that is very just, this is the truth of the situation without adding in opinions, without adding in emotions, without adding in all of that stuff, I think can be received a lot better.
Yeah. And like when we first have that lesson, like the first lesson, and I've read your paperwork before you come in, I kind of know generally what to read from that. And then I'll like ask the people, like, is there anything that you would like to tell me? And I'm like listening to them and I'm like doing chemistry in my head. I'm like, yes, I need this, that, we have to address this and this. And I'm like overwhelmed by everything. And then I have to be like, all right, let's break this down. And what do we absolutely need to start to address immediately versus what can we start to implement slowly?
Yes.
So like a resource guarder, I'm sorry, you got to kick that dog off of the couch. Yeah. And you have to challenge and get into the habit of being able to enforce that. And then helping people understand how these pieces connect, because I just had a board and train recently that was a foster dog that went home and she ended up having an incident with somebody that was coming toward her suddenly on the leash. And it was a very territorial mindset that the dog was in. And I asked, does the dog bark out the window? And they're like, yes. She's so bad about barking out the window, barking at everything. And I was like, we have to correct that as well, because that connects to how she feels on the leash. And people often don't really make the connection of how things are connected or how things align, and how we have to really like be the person, be like, we need to address both of these things at once.
Yep. No, I agree. That's a good point to bring up, is that if your client, I think a common thing that I hear a lot of trainers complain about is that their owners aren't doing the homework, or they aren't following through, or they aren't whatever, X, Y, and Z. There's probably a number of variables at play that if your clients aren't following through on the training or doing the homework, and they're almost always your fault as the trainer. It's usually always comes back on you. It could be something as general as the way you market yourself is not true and fair to what their experience is going to be like. Are you marketing yourself as quick, fast, easy, all this kind of thing? Because if that's how you market, those are the people you're going to attract, is the people that want quick, fast, easy, no work. And those people don't tend to make the best clients. If you're marketing yourself very realistically, and when you're communicating with clients at first contact, you're really explaining exactly what their role is going to be and how heavy that role is in the training process, and then you're still having incidents where they're not following through or doing their homework, it's either because they don't understand why the homework is important and how it connects to their goals. Like if you have somebody coming in with the dog is leash aggressive and you spend the first 3 weeks focusing on bed stays and they're not doing the homework, probably because they don't see the connection. They don't find this valuable. They're frustrated because their main priority is leash aggression. And how is this going to affect leash aggression? And if for you and your program, bed stays are an important puzzle piece in that, then we need to be explaining thoroughly to the client why this is important. We need to address the elephant in the room of like, listen, I know this is your main goal, but these are the steps we have to use to take to get there to be able to accomplish that. Because if you're not giving them the information of why it's important, they're not going to know and they're not going to do it because it doesn't seem important.
Yes.
It could also be that you're maybe prioritizing things that again are not important to them.
Yeah.
You know, if leash work is their biggest issue, do bed stays later. Do leash work first. There's no reason you can't start with leash work. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I've had a couple clients with German Shepherds just recently start, and it's the reactive German Shepherds like we usually all get. We're doing leash walking right away. I'm not even focusing on bed stays at the beginning, you know? So I think that's where you as a trainer have to get more comfortable, like molding your program and your process to
meet the client needs.
Exactly, to meet the client needs.
And like, not that I'm trying to get the fastest results as possible, but I want to immediately get on the track of making your goals happen. Whether that's like different scenarios. Like I had a dog that killed bed stays here. He was proficiently able to hold a bed stay here, and at home every week they'd be like, well, he's just not doing it. And like you have to unpack more. Well, I have to ask more questions. Well, what's going on? Walk me through how you do a bed stay. Oh, well, we're doing it at dinner, and then eventually like I want to eat, so I just give up. And the dog gets to get off the bed stay, and it's like, well, let's try to adjust that. They come back the next week and they're like, it's still happening. And then I'm like, are bed stays important to you? Like, is that really what we want to be doing? If we can get this dog to go into the crate when you're eating, like, yes, I want to be able to help you do the bed stay, and I'm not making excuses, but there are sometimes like week after week after week, I'm like, this isn't aligning. This is not working out. So what can our next option be? Can we correct the dog for begging at dinner time if he's pawing us, rather than you feeling like you have to be forced to do something that you're not passionate about? So. Yeah.
No, and that's a big piece is like looking at, are you forcing the dog or the client to try to do something that you think is important, but truly isn't? And yes, there are certain things that like, if your goal is off leash and every week you're showing up and you're not practicing with your long line, then my conversation at that point would be, if your goal is off leash, this is the step to get there. I obviously can't force you to do these things. Have your goals changed? Do you not care about off leash anymore? You know, we kind of need to reassess. But really, if they're clear about their goals and you're clear about communicating how the step-by-step process is to get there and why it's important, I've never really had an issue then with a client not doing it.
Yeah, and like doing what they actually care about. Like you can very much clearly tell when someone's put in a week of work into a command that you're teaching. Like my girls, Penny and Copper, right off the bat, they said we want off leash. So we immediately started to obviously refine everything that we needed to get, but in place, like the night and day difference from our first long line session to our most recent one was exponential. The dogs had a very clear understanding, and before, like every now and then, the beagles, their hounds, would just kind of blow off those commands. The next week, instant snapback, instantly coming back to the owners, and I was like, these are dogs that I would deem off leash ready. But if you come to the session and it's sloppy, and I am going to say, I'm sorry, we can't move on because out of like ethical and safety, I cannot instruct you to take the leash off when you cannot even form these like basic commands with your dog, and your dog is listening to you and respecting you.
Yes.
And that's where people sometimes get frustrated with trainers because they're like, you're not making this happen.
Yes. Well, and I think too that aspect of, as the trainer, making sure you stay in control of the training program and the sessions and the process is so important for the success too, because there are certain clients that if you allow them the ability to dictate what happens to the extent of like, oh, like we want to work on this today, or we want to work on this or whatever. And it truly is going to hinder the process that you have set up that you know works. You can't let that happen. Like you just can't, you know? So, you have to be able to kind of take control of that situation and be like, listen, if this is the goal, this is what we need to do today. And so that's what we're going to do to get you there. Yeah. Because in the same way that if you let a dog manipulate everything and walk all over you and you don't have consistent boundaries, then they don't respect you. You can end up in that spot with your clients too, where they will also take advantage of you as well. Yeah. We actually had, I'll pull this up here. We have a trainer that follows us. She sent me some messages and asked for some advice about a client that she has that she's working with, and basically some insight on when you think it's maybe time to like part ways, if you don't think it's a good fit, things are not vibing, stuff like that. And I thought it was an interesting situation that I thought we could just kind of touch on and talk about a little bit. But basically, been working with is a paying client, and she's having a really hard time with, it's a client that seems to cancel a lot last minute, doesn't keep appointments, has very low initiative as far as like rescheduling appointments or keeping the timeline of things. An older client as well, so there's some like physical limitations, and it's a very large breed dog. Is very haphazard about like using the training tools, isn't committed to them. A lot of like bleeding heart syndrome where she just feels bad, stuff like that. A lot of like separation anxiety, intense crate issues, all of that kind of stuff. And basically what the trainer has said is that it seems like every time a task or something is given to the client to do, there's excuses of like, well, I can't do that because of X, Y, and Z, or I can't do this because of X, Y, and Z, whatever. And stuff like that. And so she's frustrated. The client seems frustrated. The client talks to her very disrespectfully at times, and her staff at times as well, things like that. And so my first question was basically, what were her goals at the beginning? If you find yourself in just a mess like this with a client where like it's out of control, there's a lot of aspects to it. The first step that I would take is you need to figure out, why did they sign up for training? Either look at their paperwork and find it, ask them directly. Why did you sign up for training? What was the catalyst? What was the moment that you said, okay, this is the straw that broke the camel's back. I need to sign up for training, right? And then whatever they say, because usually there's one or two things that people really, really want fixed when they sign up for training. And then once you have that and you've talked to them, you need to give her one thing to do that directly affects and addresses whatever those goals were. And you need to tell her, you do your session, whatever. At this point as well, this client has gone way past the normal allotted sessions as well. So we're beyond like what this client has initially paid for. And there are instances here, like our commitment to you and your dog is that we will work with you until your dog and you are at a very good place, given that you are also committed and
showing initiative on your end of things.
Exactly. So that's what's lacking here, is that what I had pinpointed for her is that there was a lack of boundaries and accountability as far as the trainer's time and energy that she was allotting to this person. And the client knew that there was no urgency, there's no priority needed, because if she canceled last minute and then haphazardly did another appointment and did no work in the meantime, it wouldn't matter, because she could just keep doing that over and over again. And I also wondered too, and a piece of this I think that I gathered is that it was a lot of the trainer hunting down the client.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not going to chase you. You're an adult.
You know my number.
You have our number. I will reach out to you, and then the ball is in your court. You know, you get to decide what is important to you and what you want to dedicate your time to. I'm not going to chase you around. And if we get into a situation, which honestly doesn't really happen, but if you get into a situation where the client is perpetually struggling with the same thing, and every session you're doing, it's the same thing over and over and over again, I tend to set a boundary where I'm like, okay, here's the goal. This is what you have to do. We know it works. That's a big piece of it. We know it works. It's just a lack of initiative on your part.
You can demonstrate that in our facility that we are able to do that, and we have the owners take over, and I want to demonstrate their timing is good, their markers are good, their corrections are coming appropriately and efficiently. And then when they go home, I'm like, okay, we've got a plan. Now you go home, and I tell them exactly what to do. And if they come back the next week, they're like, oh, we didn't do anything.
Well, and if you're at a point too where you're not in a consistent weekly schedule, because maybe you're outside of your allotted sessions, then what I do is go home, do this, and you call me in 2 weeks and let me know where you're at. Okay. And that could be perceived as bad customer service because I'm not reaching out to them and I'm not checking on them. We're beyond that at this point. If I've done a number of sessions and it's the same thing every time, and it's clear, because like you said, the dog will do it for me, the dog will do it for you when I'm here. The only missing piece is that you can't seem to have success without that accountability of me being over your shoulder telling you what to do. Then that just means there's a lack of persistence, a lack of dedication, a lack of follow through on your part. If you want to film yourself and send me a video, please do that.
I always ask for videos.
If you want to FaceTime and Zoom so that I'm not there, but I'm there, that's always an option. But if we get to this point where it's clearly just a motivation issue on the client's part, you set that boundary. You let me know how things are going in 2 weeks. We'll regroup. We'll see how things are. And then we can address from there. And if they never get back to you, let them go. At that point, let them go. If it's important to them and they want to fix it, they will reach back out. But I don't think that it's your job to make them try to care about something that clearly isn't a priority to them anymore.
Yes, yeah. And it's what's important to set boundaries with your clients and be like, my policy is that if you cancel a lesson like within 24 hours, like, yes, I'll give you like a freebie. I understand life happens, that your work schedule is crazy. But if multiple weeks in a row, you're like, oh, last minute I'm canceling. At some point, you have to set a boundary being like, my policy states that if you cancel twice, no call, no show. If you cancel within minutes of your session, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to forfeit that session. And like, we're very understanding. I think we're very
We make exceptions all the time.
Yes, exceptions all the time. But if it's a pattern for somebody else, then I can assess maybe you're not taking this seriously as we need to be successful. So it's like good to evaluate like having those boundaries, and then I think that makes the client more motivated. Like, if I miss this session, I'm out with one of my lessons completely.
Yep, exactly. So, yeah, because I think our policy is you get one freebie.
Yes.
If you cancel within a 48-hour window of your appointment, you get to reschedule that one for free. If that happens again, every time you cancel within a 48-hour window, we have the right to forfeit that lesson to be rescheduled. And again, do we enact that commonly? Not really, because there are extenuating circumstances for a lot of people, and we get that. And if you're a dedicated client and shit happens, like, I understand. But it's in place for those clients that take advantage of your time, you know, and tend to cancel haphazardly all the time and everything. So it's definitely good to have those boundaries like preset from the beginning, because if you didn't have them and then you try to enact them halfway through, it can get difficult and messy.
Something that you can also start to do with your clients is if they're struggling with the same thing over and over and over again, and you're not really assessing like how much effort are you putting into this, I can't quite gauge it because I'm not there. Have them take the initiative and say, film me a video.
Yeah.
And if they get you that video, you're able to see what's going on. They cared enough to set their phone down and film it for you. That shows me initiative. That shows me the client wants to work through this. We had a client a couple months ago that was struggling with the same issues with her 2 dogs over and over and over again. And David and I had been out to her house multiple times. We had addressed exactly a game plan, and we wouldn't hear from her for like 2 weeks, and then she'd be like, everything's a mess. Or we'd hear from her in 2 weeks, and she said, everything's great. So there's a point where she had messaged us and David said, tell her to get a video. And she gave me the runaround for like 2 weeks. Like, oh, well, like I was just tired. My house is messy. I can't get you that video. And David's like, don't reply to her until she gets you that video. Like, we want to be there to support her, but she has to put in initiative to care about the problem. I can't just keep going out to your house if you're not going to do anything.
Yep.
Because it doesn't come down to what I'm doing with your dog. It comes down to what you're doing with your dog.
Yep. And I think that is what you said is actually a really good point of, I've had some clients where they'll come back for a session after the week. I'll be like, how'd it go this week? And I ask that general question because I want to gauge their like emotional state.
They're either like, you get one of these, you go,
Yeah, because like sometimes like if you immediately go into asking about specific things, you can't gauge like their overall perception and view of how they feel as a whole the week went. So I'm always like, how'd this week go? How'd they do? And then usually we'll get like if it's like a rough week, we'll get one of those where they're like, it was terrible. It was a mess. And if that happens, then you start asking your pointed questions. Okay, what exactly was a mess? And then they have to kind of think about and separate. And most of the time, that can actually allow them to separate, oh, there were some wins. Oh, okay, so the counter surfing was actually a lot better, and they start thinking about all that, and then they're like able to pinpoint, okay, the leash walking was the really bad thing. Okay, so then if your leash walking being bad clouded all of these other successes, that's a clear indicator for me that that must be really important to you. So let's immediately address that and work on that, right? So I think being able to ask questions when you have a client who maybe is a little more over dramatic about like, it was terrible, it was so bad, they were awful, and then you figure out exactly what it was that they were struggling with and you can address those things. Then you can start like removing the theatricalness of it out of it, you know, where they're like, it was so awful. And it's like, well, it wasn't awful. We just got to fix the leash stuff. We can do that. Let's go do it right now.
And like people of that mindset sometimes have a hard time seeing the positive changes that they're making because that not everything can be fixed immediately.
Yeah.
So it's also like a good trainer is going to be like, let's talk about the wins that you've had today.
Yes.
Let's talk about what's
the highlights.
going well. And let's talk about and make a game plan for what we're going to change and what adjustments need to be made so you can continue to succeed. And I
Yes.
just want to see that the client is motivated enough to go on that journey with me, and that I'm not caring more about it. And I'm like, I've gotten to I'm sure you have too, many, many times where I'm like, I care so much more about this than the client does.
Yes.
And then you have to be like, wait a second. I need to reassess, and we need to go from there. And I'm not going to roll my eyes at you. I'm not going to, the second you leave a session, I'm not going to be like, oh, that person's an idiot.
Yeah.
Because that's bad business. You shouldn't have those angry feelings. You need to be like, what can I do to make the situation go better?
Yes. Yeah. So there is a balance. I mean, there's a balance of you as the trainer that they are hiring to help them hold the most power over how this experience is going to go. And I think that expecting your clients to carry that weight is unfair, and it's bad customer service. Like, it's my job to make this a very good experience for you. So I need to figure out how to do that. And yes, I mean, a huge piece of the success is the client being dedicated and putting in the time and the energy. But there's a reason that there's some personal fitness coaches that are way more successful than others, right? Because some people are just really bad with clients, and you could have the same person go to 2 different coaches and get super fit and lose all this weight with one person, where with the other person they weren't able to do that. And maybe they're using the same workout plans, the same techniques, but what the difference was the human that you were interacting with that was motivating you, that was guiding you through it, and all of that kind of stuff. So you as the trainer hold the most power over how the experience goes.
Yes. And to the point of the health coaching, you can't go back, as a client, you can't go back and get angry that you're not losing weight if you haven't followed the meal plan,
Yes.
if you haven't followed the workouts, and you're not consistently committed. Yes, you're allowed to be frustrated that things aren't going the way you thought they could go, but ultimately you want that person you can rely on to be supportive and be like, let's keep doing this. We're going to keep going with the plan that we had. We need to make some adjustments, or we need to change everything that we're doing.
Yep.
So those are the 3 scenarios that sometimes happen, and it's our job as the trainers to be like, I need to problem solve in the moment. I have an hour to problem solve this. And I go home and think about it at night sometimes, and I'll give the client a call the next day and be like, you know what? I've had some time to think about it. How is it going? And we can continue to communicate with them to keep them successful.
Yep, absolutely. So there was an interesting news article that I saw that we're going to talk about through the lens of this topic that we have. So we're going to pretend maybe
this person
walked into our door, either one of these people, walked into our door and had this experience and wanted to tell us about it, and how we, keeping in mind the customer service aspect, but also the ability to be truthful and real with people, how we would kind of approach it. But basically in Florida, it's always Florida. It's always Florida. There was an issue where a woman shot and killed a neighbor's dog because it was attacking her dog. And I'll dive into this situation for you. There's a very blurry Ring video or surveillance video from across the street that catches it. And essentially this is what's happening. A man is walking down the sidewalk with a dog, and he gets in front of a house, and a dog from that house runs out of the door and is running down the yard to the other dog who's on the sidewalk on a walk. The dog on the sidewalk rips its owner backwards to the left, darts up into the yard, and attacks that dog. Okay? So the dog that lives there is the one being attacked. The dog who is...
victim versus the predator, or...
Yes, the victim versus the assailant. Whatever. We'll call it the assailant. Yes. The assailant was the one on the walk. The victim lived there. And that's what happened. The dog is latched on, shaking the dog, very violent scene, right? The size difference was decent. And then both owners doing nothing, just standing there. They're grabbing leashes, they're
Probably
yanking.
screaming.
They have no idea how to properly deal with this situation. The woman who lives there runs and grabs a handgun, comes back, and according to the article, tells the guy to like move. Like she tried to, whatever. She shoots and she kills the dog, okay? It didn't die immediately. I think it went to the vet. And
The
then,
assailant was
yes,
shot.
yes. Her dog, the victim, ended up with some broken legs, lots of puncture wounds, like extensive damage, okay? So this was like a real thing happening. As far as the breeds of the dogs, because this is worth talking about. The victim was a Shih Tzu, so it was a small dog. In the article, interestingly enough, they call this dog a Fox Terrier mix, okay? I'm going to show you a Fox Terrier. You can also look it up yourself. Maybe you can see this. Paige, you might have to zoom in. This is a Fox Terrier. Okay, we got this. This is a Fox Terrier. Here is the assailant. I don't think that's a Fox Terrier. Okay? I don't think that's a Fox Terrier. I would say you'd be pretty accurate if you looked at this dog and you said, that's a bully breed.
Mm-hmm.
There's some type of bully in there. Some type of bull breed dog. Whether that's pit, whether that's bulldog, there is some type of something in there, right? And by the way it attacked the other dog, that would track. Mm-hmm. Grabbing, shaking, not letting go. They're punching it. In the article it says they're punching it, they're hitting it, they're yelling at it, they're doing all the things, right? Bridget, who's at fault?
You know, both people are at fault. But I assure you that both people feel like the victim here. I assure you that there's a lot of probably fighting on the internet about who's right, who is wrong. But in reality, both people could have done things differently. And it's a horrible situation. And I empathize for the dog that was shot and killed. But I'm not saying that I understand it, nor do I approve of that. But
neither are right and neither are wrong.
Yeah.
I think that this is a perfect example of the extremes on both ends of the spectrum of what happens when you fuck around and you find out with your dogs. Yeah. Because let's take the woman in the house with the Shih Tzu. Should the Shih Tzu have barged out of its house and antagonized and ran at another dog? No. Right? So in that situation, that behavior is inappropriate. And again, we own little dogs, okay? And something we've talked about many times before on this podcast is that when you own a little dog, there are just things that you need to recognize are silly to allow to happen, knowing the level of risk that comes with them being mortally injured, okay? Like Snoop, my Chihuahua. I will not allow him to perpetuate behaviors that antagonize other dogs, where if an altercation happens, he will be the one that comes out of that maimed, far more than the other dog would.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And again, that's not saying that did the Shih Tzu deserve to get attacked like that because it ran out in its yard and it barked at another dog and charged it on the sidewalk? No, right? So the other dog and the owner in that situation, but devil's advocate, had she had control over her Shih Tzu and not allowed it to do that and get to the sidewalk and engage with the dog, would that situation have happened? No. So had she had control over her Shih Tzu, we could have avoided this altercation altogether.
Yes.
Right?
It's very likely that this has been a long time problem for both dogs, and there's things leading up to it that people probably don't notice. So by allowing the Shih Tzu, for example, to bark at the window at every single dog and get in that really reactive mindset, ultimately led to a horrible, horrific accident because the owner allowed it. And the fox terrier, that we'll call him, maybe he was really reactive on leash. And letting his owner, just pulling his owner around. So although, like, I don't want to blame people because it was ultimately a horrible accident.
Yeah, it's just like all the variables that could have gone wrong went wrong, and then you had a catastrophe. Oh, 100%. Because a mixture of reactivity and, like, had she done door drills with that dog to know it can't just barge out the door, to know all of those different aspects, the Shih Tzu being trained and under control could have avoided that issue.
Yeah.
And conversely, if the person who adopted this fox terrier trained their dog and took their dog's issues seriously, the issue could have also been avoided.
Yes. Yeah.
And that could have never had to happen, and his dog wouldn't have been shot and killed. Right?
Like, with your little dogs, like, people don't realize that you still need to train your little dogs. I don't care that they're more physically easy to manage and you can pick them up and laugh at them for being reactive. That shit's not going to fly. Nelson did that shit and almost got himself killed. Yeah. And I'm such an advocate. Like, people are like, but he's little. He's just a baby. No, he's not. He's a dog that you can still communicate with and set boundaries with.
They're not, you don't need to infantilize little dogs and treat them as if they're little baby puppies forever. They're grown adult dogs, and they can learn boundaries just the same as anybody else. But yes, the man walking that toy fox terrier, I would say if he's claiming that was a fox terrier, first of all, it states in there that he had rescued it. Either the rescue told you that, which again is shame on them, that we're marketing these dogs from rescues and pounds as lab mixes, fox terrier mixes, boxer mixes, you know, anything to avoid saying pit bull, bulldog, like bully breed. Yes. Shame on you for marketing the dog that way, if that's what you were told, sir. And then on top of that, going out and getting a random dog and not taking it seriously about needing to train it. Because in the video, the Shih Tzu had made it, I don't know, like maybe 3/4 down the yard, and this dog met it there. So it wasn't like this dog got bombarded by this dog and was like, what do I do? It 100% made the conscious choice to go and engage with the Shih Tzu. So again, it's like no one's right, no one's wrong in this situation. It's just both of you were grossly underprepared. And if you're going to have a dog, it is 2023, people. We need to know how to break up a dog fight.
Yes.
Like, did the dog need to be shot and killed? No, it didn't. Is punching it and spraying it with water and doing all the things they tried to do in that video going to work? No. But shooting it, I think, if you're gonna, again, it's like, I get it. You know, your dog is dying. You see it dying in front of you. You're panicked. And honestly, if your dog is the one being attacked, you don't have the responsibility of knowing how to control your dog and get it to stop attacking another dog. That is on that man. One of the quotes that I read from this that he said that made my blood boil was, she could have chosen a million other ways to break up the dog fight. She didn't have to shoot and kill my dog. Sir, that is not her job. That is your job, to control your own dog. If you're going to have a dog with the tenacity and the intensity of that dog, you need to know how to choke off of a bite. 100%. And again, we don't know details. How long had he had the dog? How much did he know about it? Did he know the dog had these issues and he was just ignorantly walking it around without a muzzle on? You know, there's a bunch of different things. But again, those are some of the hard truths where if you came to me as a client with either of those situations, I, of course, am going to be very empathetic. I'm very empathetic to both sides of this. I think it's a shame that a dog had to die and that a dog got maimed that severely. But I think that it's a very clear picture of what happens when neither of you take personal responsibility for your dog's behaviors, right? That Shih Tzu did a thing it probably has done a million times, and he did it to the wrong dog. And then you have that dog who clearly wasn't under control and trained by his owner, and the owner did not have the knowledge needed to own a breed like that, or a dog with that capability to be able to then properly control it.
Yes. Yeah.
If you have a dog that could behave that way, like this fox terrier did, you need to be walking it on a muzzle if you're going to be doing walks in situations like that.
Yeah.
I mean, because if that's part of your personal responsibility. There are some breeds or some specific dogs that it doesn't matter the level of training you do. If they get bum rushed by a dog on leash, they will attack it. And that, if you have that knowledge about your dog and you know that, it is irresponsible and silly for you to take them into an environment where that could happen without a muzzle on.
Yeah, there's a dog in my neighborhood that had attacked a girl, and she was walking, and turned around and attacked this girl and maimed her arm. She had, from what I understand, had her arm really kind of messed up, and it was a pit bull. And every single time for the last 2 years that I have seen that dog out again, it is on muzzle and it is in a perfect heel position. And the owners have that dog very locked down. So yes, we could look at that situation, said that shouldn't have happened, but they learned from that situation and they said this dog is not being walked without a muzzle.
Yep.
And clearly the dog is very engaged with them. So sometimes people get to the point where things have been great for a couple of weeks and then we're like, I feel bad and he has to walk in a muzzle. So they take it off and then a fucking freak accident happens.
And imagine that happens and then because you got a little bit lax with it and you're like, I feel bad, he's not in a muzzle, whatever, something happens and then your dog gets shot and killed. That could have been easily avoided had you just kept the muzzle on and kept doing the things that you were doing with it.
Love your dog enough to do what's best for them and not what you selfishly feel bad about or you're perceiving, making stories up about how your dog feels about something and say like, how can I lead my dog in this moment and how can I keep my dog safe?
Yeah.
Muzzle is a great option.
And I think viewing training your dog in a specific way. So something that I was mentioning to Bridget that I hear a lot is that people with strong dog breeds, specifically pit bulls and things like that because of the notoriety they have of their breed and everything. I get a lot of clients that they'll say, oh, I know we need to do training. And mind you, their dog is pretty out of control, right? Most of the time when they start training. And they'll say, I know we need to do training because him being the breed that he is, I really want to make sure that he is under control, so he's never in a situation where people could blame him for what happened, or it's always going to be pinned on him, or people or have such a negative opinion of them, and blah, 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 blah. That's not a bad reason to train your dog, but I wish people would change their perspective a little bit from, I'm training my dog so that other people can't blame them for doing something, and instead look at it as, I'm training my dog because it's my personal responsibility to make sure the public is safe around my dog. And this is a predator.
Yes.
Right? So it's like, the reason why people will point a finger and blame a pit bull or a Doberman or a Rottweiler or a German Shepherd and say those dogs scare me, that dog jumping and barking at me on its leash is scary, is because they have reason to. Look at that. The woman who got her arm mauled by the pit bull, the people who got attacked by a German Shepherd as a kid, like, there are reasons that certain scary breeds have reputations as being scary, and it's because they do scary things. And so if you are going to get a dog that is very strong, very intense, has very strong capabilities and danger to them, it is your job to make sure that that is under control, not just to have a different perception by the public.
Not that everybody's seeing your sweet little pebble.
Yes.
I was in a lesson with a client. We're at Edgewater. and a little girl came directly into our space and said, "Can I pet your dog?" And my client and I answered at the exact same dog, and I said, "No," and she said, "Yes." And I was like, "No, we're in training right now." And I had to ultimately take the lead, and she's like, "I guess that's the right answer, but I want to make a good name for pit bulls." And I said, "That is not your responsibility.
Yes.
Your responsibility is to train the dog in front of you." And if we're constantly like in the mindset that for people to love and respect pit bulls, they have to go and interact with them and pet them and just see how sweet they can be. That's a really unhealthy mindset.
Yeah.
And I'd rather say no to the children coming up to pet because I don't understand the risk. And if that dog had bit that child, it had felt uncomfortable, what name is that giving to pit bulls?
Yes. It is. It's fascinating to me how when something bad happens with pit bulls, people are like, not all pit bulls are like that. But when something good happens with pit bulls, they're like, see, all pit bulls are like this.
Mm-hmm. They're not.
They're not. They're not at all. Again, if you decide that you're going to get a dog that has a scary reputation, it's your job to make sure that people feel safe in its presence. Mm-hmm. Because every dog has the capability of doing, and that's another thing too, is everyone's like, oh, any dog could do that. No, they couldn't. Mm-hmm. Honestly, they couldn't. There are breeds that could not attack the same way a pit bull attacks, or a German Shepherd attacks, or a Doberman attacks. Like, there are certain breeds that have the propensity and the physicality to do far more damage than any other breed. And that's just the reality of it. And if you decide you're going to get one of those dogs and you don't even believe that baseline fact about their breed, that's scary. Mm-hmm. You have to know that. I train my Dutch Shepherd to the extent that I do because I know the damage he could inflict. Mm-hmm. Baseline, that's it. You know, if I get a pit bull, I train them knowing that they can be dangerous dogs if handled improperly, right?
Yes, and it's like, it's so much different. Like, I was listening to David's podcast recently where he was watching a video of two Chihuahuas fighting. Mm-hmm. And the person in the video had just watched the fight happen. And there's many, many comments apparently. But like with little Chihuahuas or other breeds of dogs, like, not that they're not going to cause as much damage. It's like a slap fight versus like, I came to kill you. Yep. So like my dogs sometimes will get into small little squabbles, and I'm not yelling and screaming and trying to separate them because ultimately I know there's going to be no damage. Yep, exactly. But if I had like piggies in my house, and I can't have those same luxuries because when those dogs fight, they fucking fight. Yeah, they do. And so to kind of tie this all back up to how does this conversation relate to customer service as a dog trainer, it's about being honest and finding a way to be honest in a tactful, respectful way, right? If I have a client that comes in with a very intense dog breed that has a reputation for being kind of scary and dangerous, and they say something to me, for instance, of like, oh, but people just don't understand that when they're lunging and barking, that they really just want to play and they're friendly. I look at them and I go, well, of course they don't. That doesn't look friendly. That doesn't make me feel safe. Or they're like, they don't see how affectionate and sweet they can be when they're cuddling on the couch with me. And I'm like, stop. Yeah. Stop. That doesn't matter. Yeah. That doesn't matter. Respectfully, doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't. And people that have been maimed and have damage for the rest of their life because of being attacked by a certain type of dog, they don't want to hear how nice your dog is. They don't care. It's a little rude. It is a little insensitive. It's a little tone deaf. You know, I've seen so many videos of people talking about their experiences of being attacked by a dog, and they're literally missing like their bottom lip and they're getting reconstructive surgery, and the comments are just filled with, oh, but my dog of that breed would never do something. They don't care. Okay? All they care about is that it took one person to own the one dog, to be irresponsible, that led them permanently disfigured. And part of that happening is people not being honest about what it means to own and control a dog that can cause damage like that. And it's not all how you raise them. You know, like I think raising a dog correctly pulls a lot of weight throughout their lifetime, but ultimately it is not the end all and be all of deeming your dog is never going to be able to have an incident because you've raised them right.
Yeah, if you take the same dog and you put it in a household that raises it right, yes, the propensity for violence drastically decreases, because one, to me, raising it right is somebody who trains it properly, holds the dog accountable, employs the correct management when necessary, and is not living in denial about the temperament of the dog that they own. You add all of those things together, you get a very safe dog in a safe situation. You take that same dog and you put it into a house that ignores breed, ignores temperament, ignores training, ignores management, you could have a very different, terrible turnout with that.
Yes. And how many clients do we have from like rescues that have rescued pitties that they've had no idea what the past is, they have no idea the history of the dog, and we can still effectively train that dog and not get lost in the trauma that the dog may have experienced, and still have a well-mannered, well-behaved, safe dog to be around.
Yes.
So we have to look at the truth here.
Yeah. So how could we sum this up? I think that from a trainer perspective, when you're working with clients, I think your priority should be obviously trying to create as positive of an experience for them as possible, but not at the extent that you sacrifice honesty with people. I think that it's very important that I make my clients feel comfortable and safe, that they can ask questions, that they feel like they're getting good support, that they truly know I care about them and their dog, but at the same time that they know that I'm not bullshitting them. I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm not going to play into, any of those emotional scenarios that you may come up with. Like my job, and those are statements I've said to people of like, you paying me to tell you the truth. So I'm going to tell you the truth. You're paying me too much money for me to bullshit you.
It'd be irresponsible for you not to give your honest professional opinion with your clients to people please. Rather, like, how can I deliver this information that they need to hear in a kind, effective manner?
Yes.
That can be receptive to all parties.
Yeah. So, yeah, I would say that moving forward, it's important to like keep those things in mind, have very clear boundaries set up between you and your clients, prioritize their goals to make sure that, they are motivated because they see the change happening that they wanted and why they started training. But ultimately, just make sure that you're still honest with them throughout the whole process and as transparent about it as you can be. Cool. Well, if there's any other scenarios or things that I know we have a decent amount of trainers who follow the podcast and stuff like that that you guys have encountered. It'd be interesting to hear about those and those situations and stuff. But otherwise, thanks for joining us today.
Bye, guys.
Bye.